Welcome, I'm Catherine Hadro, and this is EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Abortion and Holy Communion. With the Vatican now weighing in, U.S. Catholic bishops continue to debate the topic of Holy Communion and Catholics in public life. Bishop Thomas Olmsted of Phoenix, Arizona, has issued a statement on the topic, calling on bishops to speak clearly about the evil of abortion. He tells us more. Plummeting fertility. The U.S. birth rates have fallen to an all-time low. We're joined by Population Research Institute President Stephen Mosher to discuss why this major decline could lead to a demographic disaster.
Oh yeah.
Emery and Elliott's Law. An Ohio mother pushes for the protection of premature babies after a family tragedy. The twins' mom tells us the shocking story behind a new pro-life state bill. The head of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith is calling on the U.S. bishops to have extensive and serene dialogue on the topic of Holy Communion. In a letter addressed to USCCB President Archbishop Jose Gomez last week, the CDF prefect offered guidance to the bishops on their upcoming plans to debate a statement on Eucharistic coherence. He called for robust discussion and unity. A growing number of U.S. bishops have been speaking out recently on whether Catholic politicians who support abortion should be denied Holy Communion. Bishop Thomas Olmsted of the Diocese of Phoenix last week offered his public support to San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone. Cordileone's recent pastoral letter says pro-abortion politicians should not present themselves for communion. Bishop Olmsted reiterated that, saying, quote, "It is a false patience and pastoral concern that year after year stays silent or speaks in abstractions, while the slaughter continues with the full endorsement of Catholic politicians under our spiritual care as bishops. Such patience is false because it is bereft of love and truth, and thus unmasks rather a deadly apathy towards one who professes the Catholic faith, but whose public embrace of abortion puts his or her eternal soul at risk of damnation and risks dragging untold numbers into hell by their example." The conversation on pro-abortion politicians and Holy Communion escalated following President Joe Biden's inauguration in January. Biden is the nation's second Catholic president, but has advanced an abortion agenda that directly contradicts the Church's teachings on life. The U.S. bishops are expected to vote this year on whether to issue a statement on Eucharistic coherence. Joining us now on Skype is Bishop Thomas Olmsted of the Diocese of Phoenix. Welcome to the show. You do not mince words in your statement, Bishop. You write, quote, "Woe to us bishops if we do not speak clearly about the grave evil of abortion." What responsibility do you believe U.S. bishops have in speaking up about Catholic politicians who advance abortion, and why issue this statement?
Well, I think we need to speak up, especially about the Eucharist, about being such a great gift from God, and that we have to have a deep, deep reverence in our own hearts for Christ. And if we have any sense that there's actions that are going on that are directly contrary to an appreciation of the Eucharist, that we need to speak up about that. It's the great treasure that we have a church. So we need to be defending that. And then we need to do all we can to help those who may be engaged in that activity to understand why it's wrong and why it's not good for their own souls either.
It seems that you're saying this is not about shaming. This comes down to salvation for souls. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that I have a duty. I think we bishops have a duty to speak as pastors. We're not politicians, we're pastors. And that means the care of souls is our first concern. Both the good of souls and then anything that could be a scandal to them or could mislead them about what's true and good and beautiful.
The CDF is guiding U.S. bishops to have serene conversation on this topic and issued a call for unity. What's your reaction to that? And do you take that to mean U.S. bishops should not be publicly speaking out on this?
Well, as I read the statement, it doesn't say that at all. And it seems to affirm the key teaching that was in the letter from Pope Benedict back in about 2004, it encourages us, as we certainly desire to do, to be listening to one another as bishops and conversing with one another, and also listening and being in conversation with those who are not following the church's teaching. That's part of how fraternal correction or correction from a bishop to one of the laity should take place, I think.
And what's your response to claims that speaking out on this issue is politicizing the Eucharist?
Well, that's not my intention at all. The Eucharist is the great treasure of the church. And if it's not being respected, if people don't appreciate what it is this great treasure is, we need to help them understand that. That's my duty as a bishop. I think it's our duty as spiritual fathers for those that God's given us to serve.
You mentioned this in your statement, but can you clarify, ending abortion is the preeminent pro-life issue for you as Catholic bishops, correct?
Yes, that's something that we talked about, we affirmed as bishops when we met in Baltimore several years ago. And it's something that's also stated very clearly by Pope Francis when we visited him in Rome. The Second Vatican Council said that abortion is an unspeakable evil. If that's true, how could someone who supports that, who requires others to pay for abortions, how could that not be a very serious sin and an obstacle for being ready to receive Christ appropriately in Holy Communion?
And again, this conversation goes beyond the topic of pro-abortion politicians, doesn't it? It comes down to the need for every Catholic to be aware of their worthiness to receive or not to receive the Eucharist.
Oh, I very much agree. I very much agree. We don't want to single out any one group. We want to help all of our people to appreciate the great gift that is the Eucharist, especially as we come out of this time of COVID. We need to rediscover and have a much deeper awe and wonder at the mystery of the real presence of Christ with us, now in history, especially through the Eucharist.
Your Excellency, what is your message to Catholic politicians who do advance abortion, most notably our President Joe Biden?
Well, Jesus said that in chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel, whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. And the least, the most vulnerable, the most innocent is the unborn child. So I would hope that teaching of Jesus that's so clear, and it's a teaching about what will be judged on at the final judgment, I would hope that all of our people would listen to that, and especially our politician. They can have a great impact for good, seeing that and recognizing it and acting appropriately.
And just finally, Your Excellency, for those viewers who have not read your statement yet, what do you want them to know? What do you want the takeaway to be?
Well, I want them to have a deep love for the Eucharist and realize that we need to be well prepared when we come to receive Holy Communion. We shouldn't take that lightly. We should gladly say just before receiving, Lord, I am not worthy, but say the word and I shall be healed.
Bishop Thomas Olmsted with the Diocese of Phoenix, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Catherine.
And joining us now is Prudence Robertson, Communications Associate for the Susan B. Anthony List. Prudence, welcome back. I know that you are Catholic. A majority of the Susan B. Anthony List's leadership team is Catholic. What action would your pro-life group like to see from the U.S. bishops when it comes to this topic of pro-abortion politicians?
Yes, Catherine, while SBA List isn't officially religiously affiliated, we have both Catholics and Protestants serving in our leadership. And of course, what unites us is our respect for the right to life. And to your question, I think it's wise that bishops follow the example of bishops like Olmsted and Archbishop Cordileone in speaking the truth about abortion. They have rightly said that abortion is the preeminent moral and political issue, and it's so important that leaders are speaking the truth about it. And when leaders in our country fail to bring up that inherent life and the dignity of that life, they're really plunging us deeper into the throwaway culture that we as practicing Catholics are called to combat. You know, the church's teaching on abortion is never going to change. It's a grave matter, and it will always be. And it's so important that we speak the truth about that. And we also hope that the Vatican will support Catholic bishops in speaking the truth about abortion and advocating for it, even if it means consequences for pro-abortion leaders in our nation who claim to be Catholic.
What is your message then to prominent Catholic politicians who do advance abortion, such as President Joe Biden and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi?
Yes, well, an important clarification here is that these politicians are truly Catholic in name only. By professing their belief in abortion, they are denouncing their Catholic faith and failing Catholics everywhere across our nation who they claim to represent. You know, it's sad that this question really even has to be asked right now, but it's an important one, and that is, can high-profile Catholics support abortion in good conscience? And the answer is always going to be a resounding no, because the Church always denounces abortion in any way, shape, or form. And it's important that these politicians know that they won't be able to hide behind their claims of being quote-unquote devout for much longer.
I want to get your take on something another prominent Catholic politician said recently. Last week, New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that Planned Parenthood saves lives. Take a listen.
Let's talk about how many lives Planned Parenthood has saved and how many babies have been born because of the prenatal care provided by Planned Parenthood. And if you don't believe it, and if you've never met a Planned Parenthood baby, I'm happy to let you know that I am one.
Prudence, what's your response to that, and what's the truth?
Well, let's just talk about some statistics that really break down the truth about Planned Parenthood. These are from their annual report that was published earlier this year, and our analysts at CLI broke this down. So their healthcare services, like breast exams and pap smears, are down by more than 60%. Prenatal services, down by more than 70%. And adoption referrals are down by more than 30%. However, their abortion numbers have increased. They performed more than 350,000 abortions last year alone. That's a 3% increase from 2019, and the most abortions that Planned Parenthood has ever performed in a given year in their history. So the truth of the matter is that Planned Parenthood is in the business of abortion, and it's really a shame that Representative Cortez is misleading people to believe that they are in the business of saving lives when really they want to destroy them.
Those numbers don't lie.
They don't.
Thank you for that clarity. You know, finally, Prudence, amid this discussion, how would you encourage Catholics and our viewers and pro-lifers to respond to pro-abortion policies from this administration? Is there a way for us to push back?
Absolutely, we can push back. As Catholics, it's our duty to mend society, and we can do that by speaking the truth in compassion and really convincing and helping people understand that abortion is not only the destruction of an innocent life in the womb, it deeply wounds every woman who undergoes the procedure. We need to be getting involved in our community in the pro-life groups that are available and around, such as Rachel's Vineyard or a pro-life pregnancy care center. And if Catholics aren't sure whether or not those groups exist in their area, a great place to start is their local parish. It's so important that we're speaking up and advocating against this status quo of abortion on demand. We need to be vocal about our church leaders and politicians who are claiming to be Catholic but aren't standing up for the truth and are advocating for abortion, which goes against everything that our faith teaches. We need to be vocal about their lack of authenticity on this issue.
Well, those are some great ways that Catholics can get involved and counter this culture of death. Prudence Robertson with the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
The U.S. birth rate has fallen to its lowest point in more than a century. The U.S. birth rate fell 4% last year. That's the largest single-year decrease in nearly 50 years, according to a CDC report released last week. The total fertility rate is well below the replacement level. Experts say the coronavirus pandemic contributed to the big decline, with some warning this could lead to a demographic disaster. Joining us now to discuss over Skype is Stephen Mosher, president of the Population Research Institute. Stephen, welcome back. How concerned are you about this report that the U.S. has its lowest birth rate on record?
Well, Catherine, I'm very concerned because a few years ago we were almost at replacement. All of us, whatever group we belong to, we're all having close to 2.1 children, which is what you need for what we call replacement rate fertility. Now we have below replacement levels, surprisingly, meaning that more people die every day than are being born. To put it another way, we're filling more coffins than cradles each year. That's a sad fact. It does not bode well for the future of the United States. And it's not what I expected. I expected a kind of baby, well, if not a baby boom, then maybe a baby boomlet, because young couples were staying home. It didn't work out that way.
I think a lot of people were expecting that. You know, the birth rate has been declining in younger women for years now. The pandemic is likely playing a role this past year in what we saw. But Stephen, what other factors do you think contributed to this?
Well, starting with the pandemic, if you lock everybody up in their homes, you think that they might be a little friendlier with each other. But if you take away their jobs, if you take away their income, all you do is create stress. Having a baby is a long-term prospect, and so you don't want to go into it if your financial prospects aren't secure. And I think that the economy is a big driver here. We simply have to make it possible for young couples to feel financially secure. And one way you do that is by sequestering them from taxes. You stop imposing taxes on young couples who are willing to have children. And I would argue that a young couple that's willing to have 2 or 3 children shouldn't be paying income tax, shouldn't be paying Social Security tax, because they're really raising the next generation of Americans. They're providing for the future of America in the most fundamental way.
And can you help us connect the dots? Why could a declining birth rate in the United States today spell potential disaster for our future?
Well, it's young people who drive the economy forward. It's young people who buy homes and cars as consumers. It's young people who have their long time horizons, so they invest for the decades, not just for an instant quarterly return. They start businesses at higher rates than elderly people. People, once they approach retirement, stop consuming, they start saving. They're not really drivers of the economy. You need young people, innovative young people, well-educated young people to drive the economy forward, to make technological breakthroughs and to improve lives for not only their family, but for their community and for the nation as a whole. And a nation without young people, a nation that's literally dying, is going to be a nation where it's very hard to start a new business. It's very hard to gain market share in a market that's shrinking, whatever goods, whatever widgets you're producing. So everything moves in the wrong direction when you have a dying population. Everything moves in the right direction when you have a young and vigorous population.
Stephen, we only have about a minute left. I know Japan has had a declining population for years. What's been the impact there?
Well, the impact there is they're in a long-term demographic recession. They entered into it almost 30 years ago. I said demographic recession. Demography is destiny. You know, the Japanese have been averaging 1.3, 1.4 children for 2 generations now, and they simply, over the next few years, are going to be losing more and more people each year. In fact, they did projections that by the year 3000, there will only be 500 Japanese left. Now, I don't think that we know what's going to happen in the year 3000. But the point of the study was, if you don't have children, you have no future. You're compromising your future. You're killing off your future.
Well, I hope that more and more people are starting to wake up to this and sound the alarm. But in the meantime, I am so grateful for your expertise and your insight. Stephen Mosher, president of the Population Research Institute, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, an Illinois pregnancy care center is in shock after the facility was intentionally set on fire. We hear the latest from the Pro-Life Center.
And I was begging for them to help them, and they did not.
Plus, a mother's heartbreak leads to the creation of a pro-life bill in Ohio. Why this mother is pushing for the protection of premature babies. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. An arsonist targeted an Illinois pregnancy care center. That is this week's Speak Out segment. An arsonist set fire to the Women's Care Center of Peoria, Illinois, early one morning last week. The Women's Care Center provides free pregnancy testing and ultrasounds to over 500 women in the local community each year. The local ABC affiliate is reporting that fire investigators do say the blaze was intentionally set and is considered an arson fire. Damages are estimated to be at $250,000. The director of client care at the Peoria Women's Care Center tells us that they are not giving up and will continue to offer women's health care from a temporary location.
We have promised our moms to walk with them through their pregnancies, and we are keeping that promise. One of the moms looked at the building and she said, "I learned everything about my baby in that building." And so I assured her there will be a new building.
Thank goodness no one was hurt, but what a devastating loss that will only punish and hurt women who need resources the most. Setting a pro-life pregnancy care center on fire should be widely condemned, and yet you'll notice there's barely been a peep made in the mainstream media about this arson. The Women's Care Center does incredible work for women in need, from counseling to education to ultrasounds. It's life-saving work, and for an arsonist to try to thwart that mission is evil. But pro-lifers will not be intimidated. We will move forward in our work. This story is all the more significant for us as Peoria, Illinois holds a special place in American Catholicism as the hometown to Venerable Fulton Sheen. Let us pray and ask for Fulton Sheen's intercession that we will see this pregnancy care center up and running soon and stronger than ever before. A new pro-life bill to help protect premature babies has been introduced in Ohio, but it comes following one family's heartbreaking tragedy. That story is our pro-life focus, but I should warn you, some of these images are difficult to watch. 4 years ago, Ohio mother Amanda Finnefrock and her husband were elated with news they were expecting twin boys, their firstborn sons, to follow their first two daughters. But in June of 2017, just barely past the halfway point of pregnancy, Finnefrock woke up bleeding and went to the hospital.
When I woke up that morning bleeding, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know the difference between a level 1, 2, 3, 4 NICU. I didn't know what intubation was. I didn't know any of it.
Hospital staff told her if her twins were born before 22 weeks and 5 days, they would not resuscitate them. The babies would only receive care once they reached that benchmark. 3 days later, Amanda Finnefrock returned to the hospital in labor, now exactly at that 22-week and 5 days mark, to deliver her boys. But she says the neonatal intensive care unit made no attempt to aid her twin sons.
You guys are gonna save him, right?
In cell phone video captured by Amanda's mother and shared on Facebook, we can witness some of the tragic day's events.
Look at him. Please save him.
Her son Emery was born first.
I was under the impression that they would be stillborn. But when I gave birth to him, he landed on to the edge of the bed, and nobody helped him.
Emery lived for a precious 45 minutes outside the womb before dying. Elliot was born second.
Elliot. Hi.
Elliot was bigger. He cried, and he lived for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Both her boys had died.
When I first got there, they didn't tell me that they wouldn't save my children. They didn't even tell me that they would come out alive. They told me that they would be stillborn or breathe only for a moment. And they were quite misleading because they said children at that gestation don't live, which wasn't true.
Finnefrock tells me while she could not protect her twin sons that day, she wants to honor their lives by saving others and ensuring that NICUs provide proper care to babies. That's why she has worked with state lawmakers in Ohio to create Emery and Elliot's Law. It has a number of protections for preemies and their families.
We want to make sure they're giving out proper information, because once I was admitted, there was no leaving. We want to make sure also that everybody has the proper training to intubate these small, fragile children.
Other protections in Emery and Elliott's law requires a complete assessment of a premature baby's condition. It mandates the hospital, with written permission from the parents, will provide aggressive, life-sustaining treatment if the infant shows movement, makes sounds, has a pulsating umbilical cord or heartbeat. And the hospital can only discontinue medical treatment once parents consent. In what has been some good news for the Finnefrock family,
I did go on to have another baby, and he's going to be 3 this year.
Amanda and her son met with lawmakers, and Emery and Elliott's law was introduced in Ohio last month. This Ohio mother has a message to state lawmakers as they consider this bill named after her firstborn sons.
These families are so scarred by instances like mine. I'm not alone in what happened to me. This happens, unfortunately, way too often. And there needs to be legislation in place to protect the people you represent.
Thank you to Amanda Finnefrock for sharing your story with us. Thank you for honoring your sons, Emery and Elliott. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on social media at EWTN Pro-Life on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're there. You can also send us a message by emailing prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. We love to hear from you. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.